that the circuits that were activated just before the positive experience happened grow. Okay, so now if you're engaged with pornography and that culminates in successful sexual satiation, which it can, that's what masturbation does, then the whole personality that's oriented toward that set of stimuli is going to come to dominate. It's very much like an addiction, except there's been work done with generally simpler animals.
This conversation is going to make me blush.
I think it's stickleback fish where this was first observed. So I believe it's male sticklebacks they're very aggressive towards other male sticklebacks, and the reason they're aggressive is because the male sticklebacks have a red dot on their bellies, so they don't like red dots at all. And so you can really enrage a stickleback with a red dot. And if you use a red dot that's a little bigger and a little brighter than the typical red dot, you get a super stimulus. It's virtually irresistible to the stickleback. And it's weird because the maximal activation is produced by a stimulus that they wouldn't see in nature. It slightly exceeds, that's exactly what pornography does. It's a super stimulus, right? And it's not surprising that young males in particular are susceptible to that because male sexuality in human beings is very visually oriented, very. And a lot of our brain is visual, way more than virtually every other animal, certainly every other primate and every other mammal. And so we have a situation where any 13-year-old boy can see more hyper-attractive, super stimulus women in one day than the most successful man who ever lived 100 years ago would have ever seen in his whole life. Yeah, well, that's like an evolutionary, radical
These guys are just going to talk about drugs and sex.
Well,
I didn't think we were going to go here, but I think it's extremely appropriate and important that we do. So I know that you followed what is essentially an elimination diet for a number of years. You eat meat, right? I eat meat, vegetables, fruit, and some starches, unrefined starches. In any event, one thing that is absolutely clear from following a clean diet, so to speak, brain can't parse what are the various things in here and how do they relate to my feelings of satisfaction. It's the difference between a super drug and what I believe are the elements that were...
Explain why you think that link about satiation can't be learned in the case of these processed foods.
Yeah, because in the context of these processed foods, they're activating multiple neuron systems in the hypothalamus and gut. We know that the gut has neurons that can respond to sugar, the neurons in the gut in a way that is independent of taste are signaling to the brain, oh, I'm getting essential amino acids. You should eat more of this thing. If those, let's just say a small fraction of those amino acids that are present in a candy bar, a package of Skittles, which are basically very few of them, if any, you're going to continue to forage for food because those neurons are also responsible for sugar. Basically, it will keep you eating until you get enough of this. They're totally right. Multiple pathways association. One dependent on taste, one dependent on actual nutrient content. The mouth can only learn taste association. The mouth can't actually learn nutrient content. The gut knows nutrient content. The problem is you take a food that is low in macronutrient, essential amino acids, or essential fatty acids. After all, there are no essential nutrients. There are only essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. And it will keep you eating, and it will keep the appetite system running until you get enough of those. Now, here's the issue. If you've ever,
Okay.
more fetishistic. That's one way of thinking about it as it progresses, because that keeps the novelty alive. Right? That's very dangerous. That's a very dangerous development.
right, and I would venture in a very different domain that if you were to eat your steaks slathered in barbecue sauce for a couple of weeks, going back to the way that you eat them now, which, by the way, this is a great opportunity to educate people about something that you taught me when we had dinner last, which is that if you're going to order a steak,
Acelera.
But in general, I must say I was disappointed rereading it today. I was hoping to get for the view I think it holds that I can. So I'm going to have to put a rather heavy interpretation on it to make it interesting. And I'm not sure whether it supports it or not. But at least we can start as a kind of review of the fourfold, to just getting clearer about the fourfold, because it seems to me that Heidegger's gotten a lot clearer about the fourfold. So let's start on 150 with the mortals. They're always so hard. Now, it looks a little more like what I wanted to say on the second paragraph on 150. Okay, the mortals are the human beings. That's fine. They're called mortals because they can die. Well, we don't know what that means yet. That means to be capable of death as death. Well, now comes the part that I said, but wasn't very clear in singing. But that's got, I would say, to put it extremely, nothing to do with what happens to people on their deathbed when they're croaking. I said that, but it didn't have much text to back it up. I just said that's how it was in Being in Time. But it's even clearer here than in Being in Time when he says, only man dies, and indeed continually. Well, you've got to ask yourself, what in the world can that be? It doesn't mean that you're just getting old and gradually shriveling up and will eventually come to an end. It means that there's something that you do all the time as a mortal, and either you hide it or you are in touch with it. But as long as he remains on earth, under the sky, before the divinities, that is, while he's doing that, man is dying. It has nothing to do, he says at the top of 151, nor does it mean to darken a dwelling by blindly staring towards the end. I mean, it has nothing to do with the end, I don't think. The end is something in the future, and dying is whatever it is, happening right now. And so, what is it then? Well, he doesn't give you much help. But at least there's no more talk about being and nothing, which is Being in Time talk that was there in the thing singing. So what is it? Well, all I can think of is it's a way of living such that you have an identity which you are always ready to give up for another identity. Certainly if you're going to let yourself be pulled into various worlds in which you will have different identities. Remember, my mother, who is also a jet pilot, is going to have very different identities in the different worlds where things are thinking. And that means you would hold on to each of these identities while you were in them in a different way. You would hold on to them as something you appreciate and brought out in its ownness, not by holding on to it and making it as stable as possible, and in Kierkegaardian terms, defining yourself in terms of it and having it eternally, the way Kierkegaard talks about your identity. But it would be, you would have your identity and bring it out in the full awareness that it's only one identity that you have among others, and that there will be times when it is appropriate to have it and other times when it's appropriate not to have it. And that is to say, you are not going to be an autonomous subject who has one identity and character a la Kant, and you're not going to be a resource either, which has no identities at all, but which is just a flexible something or other. You're going to be this poly kind of person, which is what human beings are really, I think Heidegger's holding at this point, whether they know it or not. They are, as mortals, capable of having different identities in different worlds, and that's what it is to be a mortal. Or at least that's my story about it. If anybody has a better story about it, I'm certainly open to hearing it. I mean, the fourfold thing is so hard to make sense out of it without either turning it into something else or make sense out of it simply by repeating Heidegger's words. It's a real challenge for exegetical struggle. But so that's it. Now, on the divinities, I also think he's made progress. And what's wrong, and I gather from Liz that people didn't buy my story that the divinities were the other, what I was thinking of calling endangered species of practices that are around. Endangered because technology is in the process of trying to make them all efficient and rational, and will do it, whereas we want to keep poesis and physis practices and Christian practices, so we have to cultivate these endangered species of practices. And I said that when they were working in a particular case of things thinking, they were the divinities. And I had text to back it up, remember, the text from the letter to the student, what is left still, how does it of the sacred is something that's still around and are still in our world, where's the student thing? Again, at the end of the thing, I quoted, and I don't think I was wrong, I just think there's a missing piece in it. I had two stories. Here's a way to put this, which will be illuminating, I hope. I had two different stories about the divinity. One was that they were these endangered species of practices that were around, and the other was that they were that to which we were grateful when we said, when the dinner really worked, or when the thing really thumb, or whatever. And now I think that those two things are really the same. That is, it's two these, and remember I said what we were grateful for is that it wasn't something that we were in control of, whether the dinner worked, but it either took off and worked or it didn't, and then if it did, we were grateful. Well, now I want to put this together and say that the divinities are these other possible practices which enable us to have identities and enable things to think, and for which we are grateful because it's up to them whether we get called into some world that works or not. Now, the new element is this being called into. The divinity, we have to get in tune with the divinities, in sync with the divinities. That is, to take my example, when you're playing with your kid, you could be called by the poesis divinities to get in sync with and in tune with your nurturing role. You could also sort of impose on the kid the efficiency story that is around. But it seems to me that wouldn't be appropriate. Although maybe sometimes when you're playing with your kid it would be appropriate. Then you'd be called by those, beckoned by that divinity. I'm making a big fuss about the top of 150. The divinities are the beckoning messengers of the Godhead. Beckoning, that is, the divinities are what calls us to get, and we have to get in tune with or in sync with, to bring out this everything in its own most in a particular case of thing. So I'm trying to pull together the gratitude receptivity story and the remaining skills from other understandings of being story and put them both together. Remember, I have a sentence at least that supports this. I just want to remind you on 184, I think it's very important, this little passage I've got, where he says the default of God and the divinities is absence, but absence is not nothing. It's precisely the presence which must first be appropriated of the hidden fullness and wealth of what has been and what is thus gathered, and what thus gathering is presencing of the divine in the world of the Greeks, prophetic Judaism, the preaching of Jesus, and so forth. That is, those must be those other styles of understandings of being, and he does think of them as the divinities. And I think they beckon us, and we either get in tune with them or fail to get in tune with them. That's my new story. Let's see. So we have to be receptive to them. And if we are, and I'll come back to this, not only do we bring things out in their own most, but we get out of this hassled, unrest situation that we're in. He mentions this, that phrase. I'll come back to that phrase. But I think part of our gratitude is that everything is being brought out in its own mode. The child, or at the dinner, the guests, each in their own way. And also that we're feeling centered. That's this focal practices thing. Instead of feeling hassled, we're at peace. We'll hear more about that in a minute. And for all that, we're grateful. And I wrote down here, and we can even get in tune with the technological practices. Why do I say that? There's the hassling stuff. But let me see. What I say is, I want to read the one before last paragraph on 150. Mortals dwell in that they receive the sky, the sun, the earth, the stars, and so forth. They do not turn night into day, nor into harassed unrest. Now, that's a funny one. I don't understand. That's true or right. Why I'm citing it right here and the way I am, I'm not sure. But what I've written here, never mind what everything I do want to say, but I say we'll come back to it when I do it right. That you're one of the things you're grateful for is this peace, this being centered and not hassled. And I also want to say, before I leave the divinities, I agree with Forrest now about the divinities on the highway bridge that they're never completely gone. He talks about how they can be absent, but they can only be absent in the sense that we are not being sensitive to them. We're not being attuned to them. Not that they're not there to be attuned to. I think that's right. That's got to do with how I was reading, and it's partly a fault of the translation, which at the top of 153, when we're talking about the highway bridge, the bridge gathers as a passage that crosses before the divinities, whether we explicitly think of and visibly give thanks for their presence as in the figure of the same of the bridge, or whether that divine presence is obstructed or even pushed. The holy is not in the German. That just makes it more extreme. It's simply pushed aside. Pushed aside isn't gotten rid of. It's just hidden. It's not that it's other things are getting in the way. But we can, and I guess maybe that's the next point I should turn to and see if I do. Well, I will, but it's a long point. We can get in tune with the divinities. You want to say something? Yeah.
Well, okay, with the bridge, if the divinities are the old modes of revealing and practices from the old modes of revealing, what would that mean for the bridge?
For the current bridge, which bridge? The highway bridge. Oh, it wouldn't. But a good question, because it shows that I haven't been clear. Now, it would turn out that each bridge had its own modes of revealing. I have to sort of bear down a bit on all these other bridges, but if you beat on them enough, you can make them look like a Christian bridge, a subject-object bridge, a poesis bridge, and a technology bridge. I mean, he's got these four different bridges here. So the technology bridge, the only gods around would be the flexibility practices. And now the challenge, you're the perfect straight man for this. That's exactly what I was going to take up next. What would it be like to be beckoned into and get in sync with the divinities that are around for highway bridges, which have been hidden from everybody but Heidegger, presumably, but which are there. And if I'm right, that would have to mean to be beckoned, that is, to be drawn to get in tune in a positive way with the flexibility of the bridge. And now comes the hard part to swallow, but I think I can defend it. And to make yourself into a flexible resource. But I say right now, but I'll come back to it, but not to make yourself into a flexible resource in general and always, but to have the possibility of that too. I mean, it's only if you think that you are a flexible resource, then you've lost your mortalness. Then you've lost the fact that that's just one of your possibilities and one of your identities. But once you see that you can also be a nurturer and also be a subject-object dominator, you can then let yourself fully be, and I'll try to give you a description for fun, of what it would be to be a happy resource on an Autobahn highway. That's the line I want to take. Let me develop that step by step. But what would it be like to preserve and promote a style of challenging forth, opposed to nurturing, it seems? How could you, so to speak, cultivate the highway bridge? It seems like a contradiction. And in a certain way, it is. I mean, if you think it's not going to look like cultivating your child. It has no identity, if the story is right. No stable purpose. It's that way. It's not like the Brooklyn Bridge, which has a very serious job getting people from Manhattan to Brooklyn. I mean, I'm thinking of an Autobahn bridge, sort of, as I say, in the middle of nowhere with lots of interchanges that go to lots of different places. And it's not in the particular subject-object job of satisfying a particular desire to get to some particular place in a stable way. It satisfies, it's flexible. You can go to Lake Como, or you can go to Hamburg, or you can go to Berlin. And all the signs tell you which of the turnoffs in the exchange you can take. So what is it to cultivate this with no stable purpose? And what is it for us to become resources with a different sort of identity by getting in sync with it? It won't, for instance, be gathering. It will be dispersing, because that's what it should be doing in its flexibleness. It can't exactly be bringing things into their own. I'm trying to make the case as hard as I can, because insofar as we're in the modern flexibility, postmodern flexibility mode that we are in, the technicity mode, things don't have some essence to be brought out into their own. So what's going on there? Well, first, I mean, now there are lots of things fixing. I mean, this is the problem that he's posing. And I got another problem which you haven't posed me, but I posed myself for the first time this morning with a shock. Namely, I never realized that the Borgman can, though very helpful, get in the way of something I want to say right now. It looks like there must be two kinds of technological something or others. I don't have any name for both of them. Technological entities. There's technological devices. Now, technological devices are very interesting, and Borgman has a great story about them, but you can't get into tune with them. There's no question about it. They're just not in the getting in tune with business, and you can see it if you take the heating story. I mean, as the central heating system gets more and more completely invisible, and the thermostat's doing its job, and there isn't even any hot air vent, it's the radiant heating is in the floor, and now you've just got the commodity, namely your room stays exactly the same temperature, winter and summer, and night and day if you want it that way, and so forth. Once you've got that, there's nothing like getting in tune with it. It's become invisible. Devices just become invisible. So now comes a new question I never thought about before. Is the only kind of technological entities devices? And the answer seems to be no. I mean, if something like the Autobahn exchange is going to be a technological something, it's going to be a technological thingy. It doesn't, I mean, it can disappear too, but in a different sort of way. It disappears in the sense that we'll talk about, it did already, when it becomes so customary that you can, so to speak, be in sync with it without even paying any attention. But it doesn't even make any sense to say you're in sync with the central heating system without paying any attention. It isn't as if you developed a skill for doing the heating system thing so well that now you can do it without paying any attention to it. Maybe in the old days they had that with the fireplace. I mean, having got up every day, chopped the wood, lit the fire, you might be able to do the foyer in a way that was completely gavant. That is, completely habitual, completely invisible, but nonetheless drawing on all the skill and drawing the fourfold. Well, that's not how the central heating system works, I think. So now I'm just going to have to introduce a new distinction that isn't in Heidegger, but then we never had the Borgman story about devices, which I like. But there seem to be technological entities which are just in the process of disappearing, which require no skill to use them, and never, from beginning to end, did you ever have to pay any attention to them. You could have been born and died without even knowing there was a central heating system, and people will, probably, pretty soon, be just like that. And then there are technological things, of which the Autobahn bridge is an example, but there must be lots of other examples, too. I think computers must be an example. It takes a lot of skill to use a computer, though you can get so you can use it transparently when you're word processing. But it isn't as if the computer is ever going to disappear in the way that somehow the word processing just takes care of itself. You're going to have to do it. Okay, now having got all that together, what's my picture of what happens on the bridge? Okay, the technological thing, let's take the Autobahn bridge, will draw you in as a mortal. That means you won't become just a resource. It means that you won't have to treat yourself as a resource all the time and treat everything in the flexible, efficient mode. So if that's true, it might be then, I think, safe to be a resource if that's what's called for. So now it looks like on the bridge what's called for is letting yourself resonate to the technological style as opposed to the other styles. And that means you get in sync with its flexibility. You just, of all the various gods, you are beckoned by that one. And what would that look like? Well, it looks like I'm sort of able to, I have this example from Charles Spinoza. You're driving on the Autobahn bridge and you think you're heading toward Mannheim or something, and then you get a call on your cell phone and everybody's in a conference call and they say, on a day like this, wouldn't it be better to meet in Como? So you said, instead of taking this on ramp, you take that off ramp, you take that off ramp. That's getting in sync with the amazing flexibility that the highway system is offering you. And you can be grateful for that, and you can do that. And just to make it even further, and suppose there's a traffic jam. Or I want to say, and you can do it in a way that you're not being frantic and hassled. I mean, there's a way to do it in a way that is sort of letting it push you around, and in which you are, say, for instance, mixing up two styles. So that what you really want to do is, your desire is to get from here to there as quickly as possible. If that's what you want, then you're in a subject-object mode, and you're going to be very annoyed if there's a traffic jam. But if you are really sort of in the right laid-back relation to technicity, what you do, this is again, Charles Spinoza is my techno man, so I go to him to find out what it's like. He says, well, if there's a traffic jam, then you take out your cell phone and you talk to people and you turn on your Carfax and you get your latest information that you need, and you listen to your tape deck, which is teaching you some language so you'll be more efficient and so forth. And that's all, and you can do all that without being hassled. And you can still be, in a funny way, at peace in the middle of all of this and centered in the middle of all of this. Well, this is a weird story. I don't know whether Heidegger wants us to believe this story or not. Forrest looks like he doesn't believe this story.
I don't think that's true, but one of the problems I find originally with this is some slippage in the metaphor.
Okay.
When you use the word bridge here, it's got to be a comparable bridge, i.e. this is not an interchange. The Germans would certainly have a different word for this interchange kind of thing. And it's certainly not the whole Autobahn system. Now, if you said the whole Autobahn system, that's clearly immensely flexible.
He says an Autobahn bridge in the German, right? Can you look it up?
It is an Autobahn bridge, but that bridge is just going to, it's going to be a hill here, and you're going to go from one side of the hill to the other with this little valley in between. This isn't the interchange. And Hofstadter, again, is melodramatic, like with your pole here, because the German could just as easily be translated something like this, designed for the fastest possible long-distance traffic.
Right.
I understand.
Well, isn't that what it said? I can't remember.
Something much more melodramatic.
But it's still technological, isn't it?
It's still modern bridge.
Right, okay, that's all. Okay.
But
There's no network of long distance, no network?
There's a network.
Okay, I like the network, okay.
No, I knew you would.
All right.
But it's a bridge. It's just this bridge, like any other bridge.
But tied into the network, I mean, that's not an accident. I mean, it's not a bridge between this city and that city.
No, I know, but it's still just this bridge. It's not the interchange.
Okay. Okay, well, I build my interchange in by tied into the network. What do you think, John? You look like you have an opinion. What's at stake? Oh, well, Forrest... Okay, well, if Forrest's story makes it... I couldn't distinguish it from a subject-object bridge if we take Forrest's story. It just is the most sort of direct way to get from here to there and satisfy my desire when I'm here to get to there. And so I wouldn't say it's important to tie into the network. That's why I could go to Como or Mannheim or Berlin or anywhere. It's not an interchange, granted, but I think Heidegger wants it to be like an interchange. I didn't put the network in there. Okay, John?
Keep following up. So it's not a bridge that's by ethnicity, and what might the argument that you've made doesn't work?
If it was a bridge that was like subject-object, it just would be, I'd have to have another example. There would be nothing wrong with it, except that I wouldn't be getting into it by using the technicity gods or skills. I would be using my subject-object gods or skills, trying to get from here to there as directly as possible to satisfy my desire to get there. Whereas I want to be a flexible resource that can go anywhere on a highway that can take me anywhere. That's what would be to get into the technicity gods. be thinking both of us do that. Oh, good. Right, it's a question of whether it's thinking in a subject-object mode or good. I'm glad you asked. Yeah, I'm trying to say that even technological things can think. I keep stressing this because nobody else in the history of reading this book has ever noticed the highway bridge, and I didn't notice it for years. I mean, when something doesn't seem to belong there, you can have an amazing capacity for not seeing it. But Heidegger's obviously hitting you in the face with the technicity of this bridge, maximum yield.
That's not what it says. That's the problem.
Oh, no maximum yield.
No.
What does it say?
It just says designed for the fastest possible long-distance traffic. That's why this is such a melodramatic thing, like the whole was elsewhere. I mean, it's still modern. Don't misunderstand.
Yeah, okay. Still postmodern. But anyway, just by our jargon. But, okay. Well, anyway.
Insofar as it gathers, it doesn't matter if it's technical.
Right.
Otherwise,
Right.
it's still be a thing.
That's right. So it's doing its kind of gathering, but it's a very peculiar kind of gathering, a kind of dispersing kind of gathering. I say that's a very interesting puzzle. And your way of cultivating it, see, it's all puzzlingly contradictory and fun in a way. I mean, its way of gathering is certainly a dispersion. I mean, that's the business of you can go anywhere. It's flexible. It's not like the dinner, pulling everybody in and fixing them for a while anyway in a certain role and giving them a closed world. It's sort of an opening up kind of world. And secondly, your way of cultivating it isn't bringing out its essence in the normal sense of essence, because in the normal sense of essence it hasn't got any. It's not the bridge to go to Berlin or the bridge to go to Como. Its essence is to be able to be whatever you efficiently have it doing. And so, but nonetheless, you can cultivate that. That's what I think. You can cultivate it as a thing as long as you're immortal. Meaning, and the question, remember, I asked is, but if you cultivate it in its dispersion and in its lack of having an essence and in your lack of having an identity, haven't you just become a resource? And the answer, is you would have, if it wasn't that, as a mortal, you understand that you have other skills to be beckoned by other divinities in other situations. That's the punchline. That's what saves you and makes you able to have a relation of cultivating and gratitude even to the technological mode of being. And that was the challenge. How would you do that? I think now there are two levels for doing it. Just to connect with my previous lecture, I said one is, well, you've got to cultivate the skills for flexibility, and that's right. But I didn't have any ontic story. Now I want to say, and here's what it looks like to cultivate the skill of flexibility in a particular case, where a particular things, and you help it, cultivate it, preserve it. And now, John.
And I assume that to cultivate a thing within technicity is already to be on the way to a pre-relation technology.
Absolutely, not only on the way. Yes, good. Yeah, I need help as much as I can get, and you're helping. Yes, all of this is in the mode of saying, and this is what it is to have a free relation to technology. That's the only way to have a free relation to technology is not just to recognize it as a mode of givenness. That's too abstract. That's what I said last time. And one wonders, and what would it be like to do that? To just sit there and be receptive to the technological understanding of being. And you got to do it ontically. You got to do it really today at 5 o'clock. And I'm trying to tell you what that would look like. Yeah.
Just one last deemer on this kind of thing. When he talks about the river bridge there, near the country town, brings wagons and horses to surrounding villages, i.e., you go over this bridge, and then it says, well, this is the road to Lenoir, this is the road to Marseille, this is the road to wherever. I mean, it's identical so far as I can gather.
Well, that's a challenge. Let me think. What do I think about that?
Maybe the prices are better in Limoges than in Marseille today, so let's, the messenger comes by and says, so you take this road instead of that road. I just don't see the difference.
And if there's no difference with the...
Well, that he just can't use this as an example for what he wants to say about the technicity. That's the only thing that's taken.
Yes, well, I would sort of make it work as well as I can, and I'm trying to think. to the surrounding villages. That's a start toward technicity, I admit, but it's a big difference from that yet, and I don't think we're disagreeing, to the Autobahn network that can get you to any town as efficiently as possible anywhere. I mean, you get a few villages here, and I see the problem. I mean, it would be more if it was like the Brooklyn Bridge. I would like it better where it only went to Brooklyn, but I'm not concerned with so much with worrying about the details of the passage. I want to make it, and I want to use it to try to tell you a story about the phenomena that makes Heidegger very interesting and very unnostalgic. Much better than Borgmann. I've written a paper about this, which I gave in front of Borgmann at Missoula about 2 years ago, called Feasts and Highway Bridges. And I think, whereas Borgmann, remember, thinks that he thinks the funny. I'm doing a kind of, this is just a parenthetical. I mean, Borgmann is kind of down on Heidegger, although he's Heideggerian through and through. He says, but there's this aura of nostalgia that clings to Heidegger because he only believes that old-fashioned things are how does he put it? Are conthing, and then Borgmann says, I'm more modern. I think the technological stuff is good as long as it serves focal practices, like good running shoes for running. And I presume the dishwashers could help the celebratory meal, and so forth. And I want to say, well, that's nice, Borgmann. You're right. I mean, there's certainly true that technology can serve things of other sorts. But Heidegger's way ahead of me. He thinks that there can be technological things singing, and that we can, and gods, and that we can get in touch with them. Something just off the chart. Borgmann listened to me not at all happy about this. He doesn't buy it. But in any case, it's an interesting proposal. Now, well, anyway, we've already had the discussion that goes with maybe, but if other people want to say anything, that's the end of my story on on the bridge business. I should put a copy of my paper, I will remember, of Feasts and Highway Bridges, where I explain in a lot of detail what I just did in the lecture in a condensed way, how Heidegger's Highway Bridge and Borgmann's Feast are related to, and why I think Heidegger's less nostalgic than Borgmann. Okay, and no more questions about that? Yeah. I don't want to think that I've become a resource. I want to think that it's wonderful that there are such things. It's interesting what Borgmann says about the highway system. He wrote an article on it. I don't think he was aware of how he was relating to the bridge story. He thinks the highway system is really bad because it avoids all the towns. And it was important to go into the towns and meet the people and see the local stuff. I mean, that's again a subject-object sort of thing. To be a tourist is not what we're talking about here. To be a tourist, in Borgmann's sense, I guess it isn't even tourist. Heidegger wouldn't like tourists, and neither would Borgmann. But to be able to enter into to some extent, these various towns, and he complains in the end of how now they can go very fast from Missoula to so-and-so, and they never have to go near this town they used to stop and eat in, and so forth. And he thinks the highway system is not
enough for today.
He says about it that's fascinating. It's the only thing besides
To
the
be
Great
continued.
Wall of China is the you can see from the moon is the American highway system, he says. And he sees it as